Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Super Awesome Show, where we talk to super awesome people who have super awesome things going on, where we have super awesome conversations. Alexander, would you like to introduce our guest today?
Yeah, I'd love to introduce Stephen McGhee, the magician of leadership. I wanted to introduce him as a master. He said, "Nah, it's an ongoing thing. You're never reach mastery. There's a path to mastery, but you're not actually this way." So I got it. So it's a big pleasure to have you as our super awesome guest today. You have some absolute bangers of stories to share. I know. There will be lots and lots of gold. I want to invite everybody who listens, everybody who is live with us now, share in comments. If you watch a replay or listen to the podcast, listen for gold, listen for diamonds, because I guarantee you, you will take away so much from this one. And I said leadership magician, right? If
Yes.
you are a mom, if you are a dad, if you're a member of community, if you are an informal leader, if you're a CEO, obviously, but you don't have to be in a formal leadership position to practice leadership.
Right. Right.
Practice leadership principles and just be the best version or a super or awesome version of yourself.
Yeah.
So I'm very, very hyped to have you with us, Stephen. And I met you in Arizona during my previous trip recently to US. This wonderful event, the Being Conference, right? Shout out to everybody who created that one, to everybody who was on stage. I was blown away by the presence of Steve, not only on stage, but in general. We had a
Yeah.
brief conversation. I was so moved by the quality of the presence of this guy. It's like, oh my God, that's on the next level. If we talk about leadership presence, executive presence, like check this guy out.
Well, let's
Listen to
let's
what he will
let's
share
let's play
and
the
what you
intro,
share.
Alexander.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's
Let's
do
play the
that.
intro, and then we can continue the conversation. Guys, welcome back to the Super Awesome Show. Just a
Yeah.
quick little intro.
Quick little intro. We're playing with dolls, and what I was really amazed about, Steven, you sponsored the event, right?
Hmm.
And you had some major experience in the beginning of the year, January. The fire. You lost your home in the fire, through the fire, and you still sponsored the event. It wasn't a little sponsorship. You are one of the main sponsors of the event. And I thought, who do you need to be to still be a manifestation of generosity and to do that? And I could imagine many people will be like, this is stuff happened, guys, I'm out, I cannot do this. This is clearly not you. And I was so moved by your story and by this. So I want to just give you a mic and give you a chance to to
Oh,
say
man.
hi.
Well, guys, firstly, it's good to be with you both, Tony, Alexander. I see some of our other brothers online already. Sundance and Ralph have joined us. Um, I just want to begin with the idea of service.
Hmm.
I believe that service is the highest form of consciousness that we have available to us physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. And as we evolve as leaders, I think we all grow in terms of the soul line, or in terms of service consciousness, in terms of how we support bringing out the best in ourselves so that we can bring out the best in other people.
Mm-hmm.
And there's just so much in the subject of leadership, guys. I mean, already what we've created is gold gems, awesome nuggets that we could each take home. And one of those is in the form of listening, which is one of the first things I heard in the intro. And a lot of people don't understand that leadership and listening are integrated, guys. They're not separate. And it used to be 25, 30 years ago when I began my journey of leadership, when I began my journey of learning about leadership, more importantly, when I began practicing leadership and ultimately teaching, sharing, guiding leaders, nobody talked about listening. Everybody talked about telling. Everybody talked about having the right solution, having the right answer, and thus not bringing out the very best in the people that were around them because there was no creation of listening, thus no service. So for anybody watching or listening to this, including me, I want to know that listening creates. That who we're being when we're listening creates a result. Like you guys have created me already, and I want to create you as a service to this show today, that what we create is something that lives on into the future, right? So that people, when they are in a situation like I was in, can use the principles and the protocols of leadership to navigate it. And I want everyone to hear that. So I was able to show up and sponsor the event, to open the conference by being real and honest. I think you might remember I started with some notes that I had I took in my hotel room on a notepad, and it just said, be honest. I don't have the notes with me right now, but the Latin of honest is honest, which is to be one with what is. I think the first thing we look at as a leader is, are we being one with what is, or are we playing some other agenda or freaking game that doesn't land? Because people know it when I'm not integral. People know it when I'm not being honest. They may not know it consciously, right, guys?
They feel it always.
They feel it. Yeah. So I would begin with those words. And then I know this is a conversation. This isn't about me talking the whole time. I wouldn't want to do that. That's not who I am. So let's play here. Let's create something here.
Yeah.
Let's do this.
So it was funny. I mentioned to you in that message earlier that my first introduction to you was through Steve Chandler's online ACS program. And so I rewatched that video.
Same here.
You were in the very first coaching prosperity school with Steve Chandler, weren't you?
I was in the very first one in Phoenix, Arizona with 22 other people. Yeah.
Wow. What was that like?
Well, anything I've ever done with Steve Chandler has been amazing. Because Steve Chandler lives into what I just spoke about. Like there's no pretense around Steve Chandler.
Right.
So, he joked that day. And I've used this joke a million times, and I give him credit every time. He says, everything I do is very carefully planned. I think it was 9 a.m. There was coffee and there was Danish, and we had notepads at our table in the U shape, and clearly there were some players in the room. He attracts really influential leaders, but he started with the idea that everything I do is very carefully planned, and we all laughed our butts off but what Steve Chandler understood was it was going to be a creation.
Right.
And it wasn't going to be some content-driven nonsense that he was going to jam down our throats and say, here's how you succeed. Because he knows that's not how we succeed. He knows that it happens through a beingness and a conversation steeped in listening. Right. So that goes way back, but that was a fun day.
Yeah.
That was a fun day. Good. It's awesome you guys brought that up.
Yeah.
I re-listened as well today to prepare for this one. I re-listened to that one as well to prepare.
Yeah.
And I remember taking lots of notes. The way back when I watched it for the first time, I almost transcribed the thing. That's how good it was. It still is.
Yeah, it still is.
Yeah, you started with service, and I'm curious. And I know Steve Chandler is also very much about service. Wholehearted service, soulful service. I think people have all sorts of understandings and misunderstandings about service. What is service for you, Stephen?
Well, it's being highly involved and detached. See, the second I'm involved and I want to get a result with someone, I want them to like me. I want them to thank me. I want them to hire me. I want them to connect me with someone that I want to get connected with. So I have an ulterior motive. I have an agenda. The moment I've moved into some form of attachment, I cannot be in the formless nature of service consciousness. Service happens for me through the listening of self. So I brought up listening, there's us listening to each other as guys, as men, to other human beings and our teams and business and all of that. We can talk about that. But the deepest listening is when I'm in listening of what am I to do. So maybe I'm in a public place somewhere and I see someone that's struggling over on the side of the room, and I get a hit through what I would call spirit. You could call it insight, you could call it instinct, you could call it intuition, you could call it a gut feel, but I'm going to move on that.
Right.
And guys, I want to be honest. Like, I don't always do it.
Yeah.
Like, sometimes it's inconvenient for me. I don't, it's going to make me late. I can come up with rationalizations about, but when I freaking do it, and I walk over and I make that connection and I get to know that person and I find out how I might serve that person, the graceful energy, the grateful energy that comes through me to them, that gets created in what I call a portal of possibility.
Nice.
It's just off the charts. Nice. So that's just one example. I'd love to hear how you guys hear,
This is so beautiful. I want to jump in and directly respond to that, because the fact that we have this conversation is from my experience, my story, my life. It's a series of divine nudges, intuition, spirit, call it whatever you like. Following those, including going to Arizona, literally like last Sunday before Christmas, I received the nudge to go to Arizona to be at this event. Actually, I wasn't planning to go. And also to ask Steve for a be with, right? So Steve is a legend in our field of work. I'm referring to Steve Hardison, the ultimate coach who announced his retirement, sadly, but understandably. Part of the nudge was, you don't know how much time you have with Steve. He might say goodbye or retire or say I'm done every moment. It was literally part of the nudge. It was like a message coming in. And I was like, whoa, okay, I'm acting on it. Right. And I went and we met and invited you to the show. And this is part of the story. The fact that we have this conversation is actually, the probability of this is close to zero. And this is happening. Can someone pinch me, please?
Right. That's and I love the phrase that you use, the portal of possibility. In fact, I hope you don't mind if I borrow that. I will, of course, give you credit, but I love the portal of possibility. That's an amazing statement. And similar, so Alexander knows the story. I had been given a nudge back in September. Back in September, I was given a nudge, and it was a nudge to open up possibility and to help a friend of ours get to the AJC school. We're both a part of Ankush's school, and help this person get to London. And I was not in a situation to do so financially. And however, we came together and made it happen. And as a result of that, it led to more things. So to your point of service, when you can completely let go, like you're talking about, and just live from service versus what's in it for me versus with them, and just live in service, that comes back to you tenfold. And as a result of the nudge that I took and went all in with that nudge, with a week later, I was hired by Amazon to give a leadership training to their talent staff. I was like, wow. And it's just amazing how that works. But to your point, it only seems to work when you're fully living in service, when you're not looking for something, you're not trying to get something out of it. Is that hitting the nail pretty close on the head?
100%. All three of us sharing little bits and pieces of service consciousness and what truly happens from service, is magical. And I think it's important to understand that service is something that is really formless. And I think, I've said that, but meaning it doesn't have an agenda. It doesn't have a shape or a form to it. And it requires a deep listening to apply it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Big time.
So way more than just shutting the F up.
Yeah, you have to
Like-
listen. You can't step over the gold. You got to be there for the gold. It's funny because that's one of the things that Alexander and I and a few have talked about the power of listening quite a bit long before we got on this call. And I know for myself personally, I catch myself all the time either stepping over gold or missing something. Go, wait a minute, no, go back to that. There was something right there, and reaching back and grabbing that thing that we thought we stepped over.
Yeah, for sure.
I do have one thing that I loved about what you talked about in the online ACS, and it's something that I'm very passionate about myself, and that's morning routine. So bring it on. Give us an idea of what your morning routine is like and why that's so important.
Well, absolutely. It's important because it's an intentionality for the entirety of your day and potentially the entirety of your life. So oftentimes the first thing people do is they have the thought when they get up in the morning, and it's usually a thought that's of scarcity. So for example, a person doesn't sleep well, and the first thought when they open their eyes is, oh, shit, I didn't sleep that good.
I never had that one. Not familiar to me.
Scarcity. I never had that one. Or I was up too late, or I have this tough conversation today, or whatever it is. So the mind will start to run familiar patterning. And not all familiar patterning is bad. It's just unconscious, and it's not preferential. So intentionality with morning rituals takes a familiar pattern and it turns it into a preference. And that's what we want. We want our day to be preferential, meaning I want my intentions for the day to be guided in the direction of my highest self, of my future self, of what I want to accomplish, what's most aligned with my soul's journey. And I want to guide it. So we talk about leadership, guys, like self-leadership in the morning is huge. I mean, you hear guys like David Goggins out there, talking about, just make your bed.
Yes.
Like these don't have to be huge freaking things that we do, but
so it doesn't have to be like 8 hours routine.
No, it could be 5 minutes of just pure intentionality.
Yeah.
But first thing, like to guide the mind, to guide the emotions, to guide the body into the day. So, mind shifts and shapes during different times in my life. My morning rituals lately, because we're displaced from the fire, are different than they were when I had my sauna, I had my cold plunge, I had my red light therapy. So my morning rituals, in all honesty, were like an hour and 20 minutes. These days, my morning rituals are more like 20 minutes. But one of them these days, just to give an example, is I believe a lot, you guys heard me talk about this before, but quantum biology, mitochondriacs are important. It's important to get my eyes in the sunrise. It resets circadian rhythm. It builds melanin in the brain. It powers the cells in my body, so I'm vital. So there's one example of a morning ritual that I'm going to do almost every single day of my life, regardless of where I am, what side of the planet I'm on.
Right.
And I'm also going to do it barefoot because
grounding. Yes.
On the ground. You guys know all about this. Maybe some of your listeners are going, I do that too. And so even if you say I do that too, I've heard that before. It's like, how consistently are we being that?
Yeah.
Because you can do it and not be it. Yeah. And you guys know the distinction and the nuance in that.
Right.
So an example of that is I can have my feet on the ground and I'm doing the grounding, but I'm not really present with nature. I'm not really present with the earth. And maybe I don't have my hands on my heart. Right. I might be looking at my device. Right. So those are just a few snippets on morning ritual, but they will set the trajectory for day. They will set the trajectory for listening and conversation and leadership and service.
Yes.
So any of those things that we already talked about begin with a seed.
Yeah.
And that seed is a morning ritual.
I like it.
So dude, every day, every single day on Sundays, there are no cheat days for you.
No
This is
cheat
correct.
days. Not with morning rituals. I have cheat days for other things, guys.
Right. So I love the grounding. I love the first light. I practice the same thing. The challenge I had here at first, I've since got it, is, us being in Florida, we have what's called fire ants. And so if I don't take very good care of my yard, I go out there and I put my feet in there, I'll come back with some bites going, oh man, ow.
You don't necessarily need coffee after. That's the point.
Those things are not fun. They're worse than a mosquito bite, I'll tell you that.
It's not good.
But back to morning routines, one of the things I share with my clients and people I talk to, and some of the courses I've built is, we're human beings. It's okay to wake up on the wrong side of the bed. However, it is your choice whether you stay there or not. How you shift your mind. Let's say you wake up going, oh, I didn't get enough sleep. Well, every one of us is going to have that thought at some point in time, but it's whether you choose to hang on to that thought or move on and create that morning ritual for yourself. And I love the making the bed analogy there, because we do the same thing. My wife and I, we get up, first thing we do is make the bed. And then when I walk into the bathroom, first thing I look at in the mirror is sticky notes that have different sayings on them and my document. And even though I can recite my document, it's there reminding me this is the first thing I need to do.
Tanya, do you want to share what that is for people who have no idea what you're talking about? What document is he talking about?
Document, for people that are listening that don't know what the document is, it's declarations, it's statements. Like I'm actually wearing a shirt of I am statements on my on right now, but it's statements that start with I am. Like, I am the most loving and dedicated father to Stephanie, Tiffany, Melinda, and Marcus, and the greatest grandfather in the world to Sophia and Raphael, my kids and grandkids. And so there's statements like that. And there's a list of them that we create for ourselves. And together that is called a document. Some people call them affirmations, declarations. You're creating yourself with those statements each and every day.
Yeah. And it's not affirmations. I mean, some people think of them as of affirmations. Like, oh, I know that. No, it's not. It's something that you do the work,
right?
Then something very intuitively, or through spirit, call it whatever you wish, emerges, and you hold onto it, and you write it down, and you create the document from this, which is, I call it my manifesto, my personal declarations, and my manifesto. This is the essence of who I truly am. And since I know that I'm coming from a different place, I had no idea who I was before I created that. I had literally no idea, And wow, actually, I have a fun. Are you open to share at least some of your document, or maybe the whole thing? I really want to hear it, and totally fine if not.
Are you asking me?
Yeah.
Well, I wouldn't share it because I don't have one.
Oh wow!
But here's why: because I went to ground zero at the Palisades fire.
Mm-hmm.
And that means my entirety was wiped clean, including who I was in the document before the fire. Now, I want you to hear that. It's not a bad thing. It's a nothing thing. And when I say that, what I mean from nothing is all things are created from no thing.
Right.
So there's no thing. I will have a document. I'll be seeing Steve Artisan on March 7th. I suspect we'll be talking about my document.
Give him a hug from me.
Yeah, I will indeed, guys.
Yeah.
I want to speak a little bit to the documents, though, because I agree with what you're both saying, that the words, I am that I am, my word. And I want to invite each of us listening to breathe that in. And Sundance just wrote something. I only saw part of it, but so I do that through Christ consciousness.
Yeah.
And that isn't like, that's how you have to do it. That's how I do it.
Right.
So before I ever really open my eyes in the morning, first thing I do is, and I did this on stage at the Ultimate Experience, I call in the light. And I want that light of the Christ and the Holy Spirit. And I want it to clear me, fill me, and surround me for what I'm going to do through the day. So if that's not your jam, find one that is. Like, your jam could be nature, your jam could be the mind, it could be a different religiosity, it could be a different lineage of teaching.
Or nothing.
or nothing. It could be nothing, to the point earlier, right?
Right.
Alex, it could be of nothing. But the key to the document, from my experience, is that I infuse it with the presence of love as I say it. We know now, and in the old days, it used to be, I used to have a clicker. You guys know umpire clicker. Or
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
the guy front door at the bar. Remember those days? You guys maybe didn't have those days, but they click when you'd come in.
Yeah. The counters.
The counter. So I had a counter, and I counted my affirmations. I'm not going to say it didn't help me. It didn't work. But what I've learned is one of those, and the whole reason I gave the preamble about the morning and my calling in the light, is because I just need one of those to go to the heart of God.
Mm-hmm.
And one of those goes to the heart of God. It becomes a living reality.
Right.
So what a lot of my clients are like, well, I don't have time for this. I don't have time for that. I don't have time for morning ritual. And my comment is almost always the same. You don't not have time.
Yes.
For this. And it becomes sometimes a conversation of accountability, but more it's a conversation of presencing. And the beingness that comes from these documents or from these morning rituals is far-reaching, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's very rare that people remember anything I say, but people always remember how they felt when I said it.
Right. Right.
So I've learned good, bad news, wrong news, right news, whatever news it is. If I say it with enough love, it lands in the hearts and minds of all people we speak to.
Mm-hmm.
So I endeavor to be open-hearted. I endeavor to be honest. And listen, I'm not one that splits words, guys. I'm not one that is like, I'm kind and I'm loving, but I can give really direct feedback. I haven't been leadership coach for 30 years by not being direct and clear. People don't pay us to be their friend. They pay us to guide them and to deepen their experience and to deepen their integrity through truth and honesty the best we can, as a reflection of how we experience the world and other people. So I don't know what you guys are hearing and all that. I said a lot there in the last few minutes, but it all relates to the morning ritual. It all relates to our beingness, our presencing, our documents, and
service,
and
leadership.
Leadership. Yeah.
Yeah. And leadership, service is leadership, and vice versa. And there's a lot to be said about that. There's a lot of folks that, oh, well, I don't need to become a better leader. I don't have employees, or I don't have teams. And
I'm a good listener. I can listen.
Right.
Yeah.
And to those people, it's like, well, leadership is everything. You don't have to have employees. I mean, leadership is the way you work, the way you treat your spouse or your children or your friends or clients. Leadership is in everything. And a lot of people, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? They don't realize that, or they don't think they need to become a better leader, because I'm a solo guy. I don't worry about it. But leadership is in everything.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think both of you guys said it earlier. It's not about position.
No,
it really has nothing to do with position. And the progression of leadership is on the move.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning, if you're an entrepreneur, or you work solo, to your point, Tony, maybe you're texting or emailing a lot. Leadership happens in every method that we apply each and every day, all day long.
Yeah. Including
just how we sit and listen.
Yeah.
Which we've already kind of touched on a little bit.
Right.
So cool.
Yeah. How you do anything, you do everything.
Yeah. True that.
So you mentioned 30 years as a leadership coach. I knew you'd been doing it for a long time, but I didn't know 30 years. So what led you? Give us a little background for people listening. What led Stephen McGhee down that path to leadership coaching?
Well, obviously, like you guys, a lot of life that got me to this point. I'm in my 60s now, gratefully. And I mean that because I love this time in my life. But I grew up in a home where we had very little means. Like I remember Christmases, guys, where I'd go to the tree with the excitement of, I didn't know there was no Santa Claus. Hope I'm not a spoiler alert for somebody. There's no Santa Claus. And so I didn't know that, but I knew there were no presents under the tree. And I remember looking under the tree going, well, there's nothing there. So we had meager beginnings. My mother reared 4 kids on her own. My father was not a part of my life for most of my life. And I share that with you because it had me start to look at, what do I want in my life? And so it seemed like what I wanted was money. Because I thought if I had money, then I could buy everything I needed and I would be happy. This is the story of a lot of us. Right. And so I got into banking, financial services. I was particularly good at the political game, guys. I was just adept at it. I had a certain level of charisma. I had a certain level of communication that it seemed like, well, I was going to do really well. So they slated me as one that was on the succession plan. In the succession plan, I was in my late 20s, been in it for a number of years. And when you're on the succession plan, they think, well, maybe one day this guy might be the CEO. So we're going to give him a bunch of training. And we're going to let him sit in the boardroom, and we're going to let him sit and hear how things get done at the highest level of the business. And we'll have him in client meetings, and he can learn how to negotiate and sell. But I had a lot of classes, and the classes I had were awesome. They were amazing high-end courses on everything from communication to sales to negotiation to leadership. Well, guess what I fell in love with? The art of leadership.
Nice.
And I fell in love with watching how one person could stand in the front of the room where the meeting was going south and everybody was ready to fire us. And this person would walk up to the front of the room and through one effective question would shift the entirety of the meeting back to a solution. And sometimes the question was as simple as, how can I serve you? Clearly, we're not hearing what your needs are. What could I do to serve you today? Right. Rather than how a lot of people want to, they want to be interesting instead of interested, which
impress.
Impress. Yeah. So that's the short story, because I got into these courses and I just loved the art of leadership. So I absorbed it like a sponge. And I got to a place where they were asking me to move about every 6 months. I had a crisis, a health crisis, because of the entertaining. I was drinking alcohol at night too much for my body type. I was eating a lot of rich foods. I was on airplanes, and what it looked like was my life was just, I was not going to have good health. I wasn't built for it. And so I left the industry, but I took with me the leadership, and that was over 30 years ago.
Nice. Very nice.
That's kind of truncated, but you guys get it. You get the essence of it.
Right. And so was it just like did you drop everything and decide I'm going to be a coach now, or how did that transition work?
No, you guys think back, like breathe in for a moment, 30 years ago. Like we're in $100 billion space now,
right?
The leadership space, and it's going to go north of that.
Yes.
I don't think it's there yet, but it won't be long till it is. Nobody was coaching when I was speaking. I was speaking for a company called Enlightened Leadership International, and we flew around the world and talked about solution orientation, collaborative leadership models. I was working in companies like Microsoft and others. And people would come up to me after the training or after the speech, and they'd say, hey, McGhee, would you coach me? And I'd say, I have no idea what that would look like. I don't know what a coach would do. What do you mean? Like a basketball coach? You mean like, they go, no, I want you to mentor me. I want you to coach me. And that's how it all began. And eventually I got to the place where I stopped speaking. I do some still to these days, as you guys know. But coaching is my primary function. And that's how it all began.
Very nice. Very
So
nice.
I've watched the industry grow, and I love it. I love it. I've also watched the industry take its beatings. I believe we're in a place now where we're in I would call it a trust recession that many of us coaches have created, where we've not served our clients well, or maybe we haven't added the value we promised, or overspoke out, underdelivered.
Right.
So we need to rebound, in my opinion, in terms of the coaching profession. But I believe that this is the greatest profession on the planet.
Mm-hmm.
And I think those of us that are honest about where we are in the profession and willing to do the work and the presencing and the beingness of listening and coaching, whew, what a beautiful way to serve the world.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Now, go ahead, Alexander.
Yeah, I have actually a question. You mean everybody who's paying attention at least a little bit and listening at least a little bit probably picked up the parts that some people connect to spirituality, and I know you are very into mind, body, spirit. With mind, I think most of us can understand what it means. With body, is obvious for most of us, I guess, as well. Spirit is less. What's that? And how did you came to where you are now, to being who you are and connected with spirit?
Through this total surrender. Because my linear mind still doesn't understand it. Can you guys hear that?
Yeah.
I can't understand it mentally. And why would I? Why would I want to? So the surrender allows me to download stuff my mind can't understand. And so I don't try to. But I practice trusting it. And that's part of the surrender. And that can be in a coaching conversation. It can be driving down the road where, like I did it the other night with my wife. We were back here in LA. I'll tell the story short. I'll make it short, but it's an example. I got a hit because we're where our home was burned down, but it's really hard to get back there still. But we're staying in a home near there while we complete business in LA before we move out of this area. And I got the hit. Go to the house. And I said to my wife, we got to get to the house. And she said, for what? We were going somewhere else. I said, for sunrise. He said, you want to be at our burned house at sunrise? She was kinder than that. I'm making that part up, but it was. That's how I heard it. And we had to get past the National Guard. That the guy's like, you guys, it's getting dark. You know, you're not supposed to be up there. I said, we just want to be up there for sunrise. Trust me, we'll come back down. He let me up. We went up there. We got up there for sunrise. My wife and I stood at our front, where used to be our front porch, and we held hands. And the sun started to set where we'd watch every night. It set into the ocean. And I cried like a 4-year-old.
Wow.
Because of all the sunsets we've had from that front porch.
Right.
And it was it freed me up, because I've been holding a lot. Like, I might have shown up at the ultimate experience and been raw, tender, and vulnerable, and I was, but this is a lot. So I was holding a lot together for my business, for my family, for everything else. So that's an example of listening to the spiritual surrender and trusting it when it doesn't make any sense.
Right.
And those are the tough moments, guys. You guys know this. I'm not saying anything here that everybody listening doesn't already know, but as a humanity, we can come together and we can go, yeah, you're right. I know that one. And let's support each other in that way of being.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And how many times in my life I used to you receive this, the nudge, call it whatever, and then you ignore it, or you push it away, or you're like, yeah, Buzz, right? Or you do stuff that you don't take action on it,
right?
Especially not immediate. If it's not an immediate action, there is overthinking that kicks in, or like self-doubts or other things that are, our conditioning,
right,
in our human nature to a degree,
and
being
I
human.
like people will go, well, what does that have to do with leadership? And I'd say everything.
Everything.
Yeah.
Yes.
I could tell stories of the former CEO of Starbucks standing up at a Christmas party telling everybody there that if things didn't change, there would be no Starbucks in 3 months. And because he did that, there were executives that came up and said, listen, I'll be without a salary for 6 months to make this thing work.
Mm-hmm.
Those are pivotal moments based on an attunement to the great surrender of whatever you want to call it. And that's powerful leadership.
Yes.
So one of your guests asked a question. What's one of the questions you ask a client? And I think it applies here. What I want to know, what is your number one question you ask a new client? Thank you, Hugh. It's this. What's your level of willingness? Because if I'm working with someone that isn't willing, we're wasting our time.
Yeah.
Right.
Game over. We
And
cannot make them want it or will it. Yeah.
You guys are I know you guys are the same, but I'm not the seller.
Yeah.
In my coaching practice, I'm the buyer.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm deciding, it's not like I'm cocky about it, but if a person isn't willing, there's no way we're going to move that meter the way we want to. It just isn't going to happen. And a lot of leaders aren't willing.
Right. Right. You're right.
They would rather run and bang their head against the wall for 10 more years before they ask for support or admit it or are ready to, roll the sleeves and go to work.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, before we move on, I did some light stocking and I pulled some pictures of you and put a little something together for you real quick.
Oh, no.
See what you think here.
You guys are so awesome. Yeah, that was a span
Super
of a lot
awesome.
of years, but that was an awesome, super awesome show. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Too bad we're not having any fun.
You said earlier something about principles and protocols of leadership, and I think some people are really curious about it. So maybe you can give a taste or your version of what is this about?
Well, there's so many, but I think that I'll give some simple ones because I think small things done consistently make major impact.
Mm-hmm.
So with my clients, we have a vision. Yeah, we have a mission. Yeah, we have purpose. All that stuff is hugely important. But if you were to start with the question, what's working with your teammate, and then follow it with the question, what we can do better, you're going to bring out what I call discretionary energy from your people. And that's the creative, genuine, insightful, inspired energy from people.
Mm-hmm.
You start off with, why were you late on the project? You've caused instant resistance.
Yep.
In the human being, the human capital that you want to engage. So a simple principle is, what's going well on the project?
Yeah.
And what can we do better?
Yeah.
And that requires a deep discipline. And some people go, well, you're letting them off the hook. No, quite the opposite. You're holding accountability toward what's possible, toward the portal of possibility. Mm-hmm. And now the big vernacular, you guys all know, it's like, I think Ben Hardy, who I think is great out there, by the way, is talking about 10X.
Right.
So you want to 10X your business. It isn't going to be from why are you late on the project, or what's wrong with the project.
Yeah. Whose fault is this? Yep.
Right. Well, and as soon as you do that, like you said, you threw up the wall. So now you go from somebody that could move into a creative zone, moves into the excuse zone, moves into the, okay, now I got to defend myself because now
the blame game.
The victim card comes out. Yeah. So it's so true when you can help somebody move into that creative state versus the resistant state. It's night and day. I mean, it's literally, like you said, 10xing what you're working on.
Yeah, and guys, I want to make sure everyone hears the caveat before I say this. This isn't in any way, shape, or form political, what I'm going to say next. But during the Pali fires, during the fire, I mean, we got 5% containment in the Palisade fire, and we're already seeing political agenda blaming the fire department, the governor, the mayor. Blame. I'm not talking about how can we support right now and we'll debrief this later. I'm talking about attacking them publicly.
Yeah.
Which causes complete and total resistance for a person. I don't care how tough you are. You cannot help but go to bed with some of that.
Yeah.
So I'm all about debrief. I'm all about how do we use this for our advancement? How do we learn from it? But one of you guys, I think Alexander said blame. It's not the time to blame.
Right.
No matter who's to blame and no matter how bad the blame is, it's later.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Here, something big about the times of crisis or big tickets or big challenges. This is not the time to blame. This is the time to support each other and see the best in each other, see the human being in front of you,
right,
and not any sort of object that you just push.
Well, and it's funny because of the way we're programmed and the way we're raised, we're so used to going into defense mode or blame mode. And as humans in general, I talked earlier about my day job, and I had a situation just today where I was bringing the awareness to a director, just awareness. I was not looking for, hey, how are we going to fix this moving forward? I didn't care what happened. I just said, hey, Chris, I want to show you this. Not worried about what happened. What are we going to do to take care of this? And what are we going to do to prevent it from happening again? And immediately this person went to excuse mode. He's like, well, what happened here was this and this. I said, after I let him go for a little bit, and I was like, Chris, cool. And if you want to go address that with your team, great. All I'm looking for is what are we going to do now to improve this, to make it better so that we don't have this again. And it took a couple of tries, but we finally got to that level. But it's going to that point where most people in general, I can't say most people, but people in general immediately go to the excuses or the blame game instead of looking for solutions to improve or make things better.
Yeah, it's like it's acting from fear and from feel the need to defend yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They're all like there's an attack, you listen from the place of, oh, I'm being attacked here, so I have to defend myself, which is created listening. We come back to this.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So there you guys nailed another principle, which is use everything, capital E, for your advancement, learning, and growth.
Right. Are you familiar with the Dale Carnegie course?
And a long time ago, buddy. Like, I mean, just enough to be dangerous. I'll let you lead the conversation.
Well, and the reason I bring it up is because I went through the Dale Carnegie course back in my late 20s. Similar story. The company I worked for at the time saw me on the succession plan and started sending me to all the training. And I hadn't thought about it for years. And I was just, we were cleaning out our garage the other day, and I came across my old book that I had kept and the golden rules. And you start going through some of these and you're like, wow, it's all stuff that now, even though I wasn't using it the same terminology, it's all stuff that we're teaching and that we're using now that I learned back then and just never really applied it or didn't apply it as much as I'm looking at it now. And like, speaking in the other person's interest, or, we talk about acknowledgement. It says, give honest, sincere feedback. I mean, and like you were talking about earlier, Stephen, people know when you're not being authentic, whether they consciously know it or subconsciously know it. If you're just giving lip service versus authentic, true, honest acknowledgement, they're going to feel it. They're going to know it. Whatever. This guy's just blowing smoke, When you can be honest about that and really show that respect for the other person, and you're creating an environment that's going to help them grow, which helps you grow, and everyone grows together.
Yeah, for real.
Yeah.
Steven, what's the most misunderstood or underrated thing about leadership?
Take care of yourself first.
Mm, mm.
It's underrated. So leaders tend to be givers. Of course, there's all kinds of different styles of leadership. But I think that if a leader really wants to do the long haul with a big vision, he or she better become adept at taking care of themselves. And I don't, people hear that and they go, well, what do you mean, like massage every week? And I'm going, like, maybe it's a massage, but
nails, very important.
It's like I have a client who I just respect. I wish I could name his name because I respect him so much, but I won't because I have an agreement that I won't. But he's a CEO and chairman of $30 billion, just to give you a sense. And he's in New York City, and there's a colleague at the dinner with another colleague, a male colleague. There are three of them at the dinner, and they started to drink too much alcohol. So at about 6:30 p.m., my client sees what's going on here, and he just very gracefully says, you guys have a good time. I'm going to call it. I'm taking, because he had the credit card. So he said, I'm closing the tab.
Yeah.
You guys do what you want, but I'm headed back. I'm going to go back to my room and prep for tomorrow's meeting. Well, not to get into particulars, but it ends up going south that night. And that's what I mean by taking care of self. Like it can be that, it can be morning rituals, living a life of integrity. And people misunderstand that all the time. People think integrity is a moral compass.
Oh, yeah.
There's a big argument about that out in the world, but I don't think it's as much. I believe in a moral compass, but it's not integrity. Integrity is knowing thyself and knowing what my authentic self needs and wants and following that. That's in large part what today's been about, right, guys? We've been talking about it in different variations, in different ways, different methods. The intentionality of living in our integrity as leaders would be different for the three of us.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like what's right for Tony might be different for Alexander, and what's right for Alexander might be different for me.
Right.
But that's the power and the synergy of collaboration. So if I'm in a meeting and I get a hit to say, I disagree with that, and I want to speak up about it, but I don't. Like I hear the voice inside me and I zip it. Like one of my guidelines in meetings is silence is acceptance. I just use simple stuff. I don't complicate it.
Right.
But I choke my words and I walk away, and that might have been the very thing that put us on the moon.
Right.
So if we allow the space in leadership, I call that the third space, which is, see, the three of us have a third space. There's no other three people that would have what we have right now.
Right.
If we put one other person in and took me out of it, it would be different. If we took Tony out and put one person, it'd be different.
Yeah.
It's not good, bad, wrong, or right, but there's a power in the synergy of the three of us right now, and it gets created through all the things we're talking about.
Right.
Yeah.
Can you guys hear that? Does that make sense?
Yes. Makes perfect sense. Perfect sense.
I love the bit about integrity and knowing thyself, and I love also the idea of integrating words and action. Like when those are one, when there is no, you think about one thing, you say another thing, and you do something completely different. Okay, good luck with that one, and how will people receive it?
Right. Yeah, you're right. And that's it's one of the things when I talked about earlier, the training I did at Amazon, I spent half of that time using Steve Chandler's expectations versus agreements. I mean, and it's huge. And of all the feedback I got from the entire 4 hours that I was there, the majority of the feedback I got was around that section, was around the agreements part. And most people don't realize how many times we're living in expectations versus agreements. And the reason I bring that up is back to your self-care that you're talking about. That's agreements also apply to yourself. It's making agreements with yourself and sticking to those. When you make an agreement, you make it a commitment to yourself, it's sticking to those. I'm going to do my morning routine every day without fail, or I'm going to, cut this many calories for 30 days without fail. It's when you make that agreement, it's sticking to it, not the expectation side of it.
Yeah.
And every time you're not making yourself stronger or more powerful. And people feel it. And most importantly, you feel it. And you show up differently. But I would love to hear you, Steve. What do you think about it?
Well, I think you guys nailed it. I mean, I don't have a lot to add to what you said, other than I agree that when we go through shit, we go through a hard time, we have an opportunity to use it for our advancement and deepen our inner strength, or it will work against us and it will take us out of the game.
Right.
So what makes the difference between a good leader, a great leader, a good athlete, a great athlete, a good teacher, a great teacher, a good husband, a great husband, is you stay in the game. And I don't know about you guys, but in all honesty, sometimes I don't want to stay in the game.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the game's hard sometimes.
Right.
And it's like, I just want to break from the game. Like, I just want to go, like, I hear about these monks meditating for weeks on end in a cave, and I go, sign me up. but I don't, it's not my thing. I'm not a monk and I don't meditate in caves, but I do morning ritual, and that keeps me in the game. So, but my point to your great question, guys, is it gonna deepen us.
Mm-hmm.
And people are going to feel that.
Yeah.
And they're going to feel that we have compassion and that we're really hearing them. I have this big thing. I don't know if we have time for it. Do I have time for one other thing?
We have no time limit.
Yeah. Okay. Well, this one I'll make quick, because you guys you'll grok it in a nano. So translating something is really popular these days. And it's not a bad thing. It's someone reads a book and they translate it. So they get the idea mentally, intellectually, and it's translated. But what we want in leadership is we want it transformed. So when it's transformed, what you hear, and you won't even know. I figured this out a while back, but I didn't know for a long time. I was like, oh, they've actually lived into the translation, so it's wisdom. So it transmits as wisdom rather than just something someone read. Now, people go, well, are you judging reading books and people talking? I'm not saying that. I'm saying that's part of the process. But what I'm listening for in leadership is transformation.
Nice.
That's beautiful. This is really beautiful. And I'm also wondering, what are you up to? What are you creating? What is the next super awesome thing you want to share with us and with the world?
Okay, so I'm going to be launching another L4 initiative.
Nice.
Program. Nice. And it'll start in April. If anyone's interested, you can, I don't know if you guys can put it in the show notes or whatever, but it's an opportunity to do work with me at a much lower fee than my one-on-one coaching work. And it is everything we've talked about today and more.
Is that going to be on your website?
Yeah, it'll be on my website. It's called the L4 Initiative. And I just had 140 people complete one.
Wow.
And they were from all over the world. So some of them did recordings like we have going on here. We have some people who are going to watch this later. Yeah. But I set it up so people can do recordings. But it is a very potent look at all things of leadership, longevity, and light. And you go, well, what's light? I go, whatever you want it to be. It could be spiritual light, but it can also be getting your eyes in the sun in the morning to reset your circadian rhythm. So we practice principles and protocols of leadership and apply them toward a project that's 10x. So I love doing it. I started doing it in 2020 during COVID because I watched a lot of people get really scared about what was going on. I watched a lot of people worry about their immunity, their cognitive function. The science is there on cold thermogenesis. The science is there on all the stuff we talked about earlier today. It's all in the L4, and I love teaching it.
Yeah,
it's a passion project of mine.
Yeah.
nice. So that brings up a question I was going to ask earlier. So you said earlier about us being in a coaching recession, and do you think some of that has to do with the pandemic? And the reason I ask is I saw during that time when we were during the lockdowns that people who couldn't get to work all of a sudden like, oh, I'm going to be a coach. And, I felt like we kind of got flooded a little bit with people that maybe hadn't gone through some of the processes that we have.
Yeah. And what I want to convey is that there's a trust recession in coaching.
Good call.
Does that make sense on me? Like the difference?
Yeah, big time. Yeah.
So I think it's part of the industry's growth. I think it's part of the industry's learning how to be as effective as possible. I think that, there's guys out there, and you guys know some of them. I'm a part of some of their schools and such, but this business, I heard someone say it's an easy way to make a hard living. It's like that. It makes a lot of sense because it took me years to develop myself as a coach, and I love learning. So I was constantly learning and growing and sharing with my clients. And I had coaches myself, as you guys know. I've coached with Steve Hardison. I've coached with the best coaches on the planet. I had a father figure named John Roger, who was a great coach of mine, and then Steve Chandler. And then I was at the University of Santa Monica with Dr. Ron and Mary Holnick. And I've always been a learner. But to your point, guys, it's not going away.
Right.
And I think some coaches just need to slow down before they speed up.
Yeah.
And there's more to this conversation, maybe a different super awesome show, but
yeah, that'll be fun to talk about slowing down. This for me is the year of slowing down. Just fun fact.
It's not a bad thing. It's actually what keeps so many coaches from getting frustrated and quitting.
Yeah.
A lot of coaches think it's going to be an easy lifestyle business and they're going to make $500,000 a year out of the gate. And it takes time to build this business.
Yes. Awesome. So we're over the top of the hour here. What's something you'd like to share with our audience before we go?
Well, I'm going to quote Steve Hardison because he's kind of the guy that got us all together today, really.
Sure.
If you can judge someone in 2 minutes or 20 seconds or 2 seconds, you can love them in two seconds. And so my wisdom about love is that it's the most powerful resource we have available to us. And that I want to live in my heart as a man as much as possible. And that I think that being a man living in our heart is an unfair advantage.
Oh yeah.
So in a good way, like, it's like, guys are so afraid to be vulnerable and all of that. But I think it's a real powerful strength to live in our hearts and to be loving. And that's not a woo-woo thing. Think of Michael Jordan. Did Michael Jordan love basketball? I'm pretty much sure he did.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Did Stephen Pressfield love to write? I'm pretty much sure he did, even on the days he didn't.
Right.
You look at any great athlete or any great artist or any great business person, my guess is they loved what they were doing. So love is the most powerful source of energy we have available. I love to serve.
Yes.
Those are kind of my final thoughts. And that you guys are so freaking fun. This is a fun show, you're having fun with it. It's pitch and catch. It's not, A to B to C to D. I mean, we went from A to W back to B, then we went to F, and then even Edward Deming said, if you're not having fun, you shouldn't be doing it. So,
I'm a quality assurance guy, so I'm very familiar with Edward Deming. That's awesome.
And you guys are awesome. You're awesome. No wonder you call it the Super Awesome Show. It's fun.
That's awesome.
And so you are, Steven. So you are. Received.
And we're in 3 time zones and we're awake.
We're awake.
Right.
And thank you for being such a super awesome guest and
Yes.
Oh, I had fun.
storyteller and server and leader
Yeah, my
and
pleasure.
more.
So where can people find you? I put up your website. I mean, for people who want to find him on Facebook, go find Stephen here at Facebook. Anywhere else outside of that in your website you want people to look for you?
No, I keep it simple. If you want to get my writing again, so if you want to get my blogs, just sign up for those, and it'd be great to have you on my list if you want to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you have some books, right? That not
Yeah,
to miss them as well.
those are out there. Those are out there.
Check them out, guys. Check them out.
Check them out. Get Real was the last one. There's another one coming, but I'm not going to say when.
Oh,
Okay.
all right. All right.
Mm.
We'll keep an ear out for that one.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Let us know when you're ready.
Okay, guys. Thank you.
All right, guys. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for being here on the super awesome show. And of course, we'll see you next time. Tomorrow morning, we're here with Ankush Jain. If you have time and you can make it early morning, it is early. It's 5:30 a.m. Eastern time, 2:30 a.m. Pacific time, 10:30 a.m. UK time. So anyway, well, thank you again for being here at this on the Super Awesome Show.
Whoop, whoop.